I watched my parents close the door in my daughter's face on Thanksgiving, and what I did next changed everything forever. The lawyer's letter arrived exactly 72 hours later, and my mother's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. But let me back up, because what happened that Thursday evening started years before anyone shut a door. My name is Rebecca Hartley, I'm 37, and my daughter Maya just turned 10 last month. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe and let me know where you're from in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to November 23rd, the night my family showed me exactly who they were. And I finally believed them. Maya and I were living in a converted garage behind a duplex in Portland, Oregon. She had a loft bed I built from IKEA parts and YouTube videos. And I slept on a pull-out couch that creaked every time I turned over. The hot plate worked when it felt like it, and the bathroom was so small you had to sit sideways on the toilet. But Maya had decorated the walls with her paintings, bright watercolors of forests and mountains and families holding hands under rainbow skies. And somehow, that made it feel like more than survival. I was 3 months into my second year of paralegal school, working part-time at a legal aid office downtown, 20 hours a week that barely covered groceries, and the $800 rent I handed to our landlord on the first of every month, always in cash, always with a smile, always terrified it wouldn't be enough. My ex-husband Derek had filed for full custody 6 months earlier, claiming I couldn't provide a stable environment. And his attorney had been very clear during our last mediation, any instability, any evidence that Maya's living situation was chaotic or unsafe, and the judge would side with Derek in a heartbeat. So I kept everything tight controlled, documented. I kept a folder on my laptop labeled Household Stability with photos of Maya's homework station, her loft bed, the art supplies organized in labeled bins, proof that we were thriving, not just surviving. I kept receipts for every payment, every grocery run, every school supply. Derek's lawyer was looking for cracks, and I refused to give him any. My parents knew all of this. They knew about the custody hearing scheduled for December 18th. They knew I was one misstep away from losing my daughter, and they used that knowledge like a knife they held just close enough that I could feel it, but never close enough to call it a threat. My mother, Patricia Hartley, was 64 years old and had spent her entire adult life perfecting the art of looking generous while giving nothing that cost her anything real. At church, she organized the coat drive every winter, smiled in the holiday newsletter, brought cookies to every bake sale, and accepted compliments like they were donations she'd earned. People called her selfless. She collected that word the way some people collect antiques, carefully, prominently, where everyone could see it. At home, Patricia decided who was worthy and who wasn't. My father, Richard, 66, a retired insurance adjuster, sat in his leather recliner and nodded along to every word she said. His silence wasn't neutral, it was compliance. My younger sister, Stephanie, was 32 and had never paid a bill her parents didn't cover. She worked part-time as a yoga instructor, made maybe $600 a month, and spent like she made 6 figures because my mother quietly transferred money into her account every time her balance dipped below zero. Stephanie lived in the basement of my parents' house, a fully finished space with its own entrance, a kitchenette, and a bathroom with heated floors. She paid nothing. No rent, no utilities, no groceries. When she got engaged last year, my mother threw her a $12,000 engagement party at a vineyard an hour outside Portland. When I got married 11 years ago, my mother said, "Keep it small, Rebecca. Outdoor weddings are lovely and they don't cost much." I paid for nursing school with loans I'm still paying off. Stephanie's yoga teacher training. My parents wrote the check. When I asked my mother once, years ago, why the difference, she said, "Stephanie needs more support. Rebecca, you've always been so independent." Independent was her word for inconvenient. And then there was how they treated Maya. Stephanie's daughter, my niece Lily, was 7, blonde, bubbly, the kind of kid who performed for adults and got applause. My mother posted photos of Lily on Facebook every week. Lily at the pumpkin patch, Lily making cookies. My precious granddaughter. Maya was Rebecca's kid, or sometimes just the girl. Last Thanksgiving, the one before this, Maya had been seated at a folding card table in the hallway, while everyone else sat in the dining room. When she asked why, my mother said, "The big table is for immediate family, sweetie." Maya looked at her with those wide brown eyes and said, "Aren't I immediate family?" My mother changed the subject. I said nothing. I swallowed it. I was 2 months into the custody battle, sleeping on a pull-out couch, and terrified that one wrong word would end up in a court document with my name on it. But someone else noticed. My great-aunt Claudia, she was 91, sharp as a tack, and she lived in an assisted living facility in Beaverton, 20 minutes from my parents' house. She'd heard about it through a phone call I didn't know Maya had made. Maya called her sometimes, just to talk, and one night after that Thanksgiving, Maya told her about the little table. Aunt Claudia didn't say anything to me. Not yet. She was waiting. I just didn't know for what. Let me tell you about the house. My parents lived in a craftsman-style home in Laurelhurst. One of those tree-lined neighborhoods where every house looks like it belongs on a postcard. 4 bedrooms, wraparound porch, original hardwood floors. My great-aunt Claudia bought it in 1962 with money she saved from 30 years of teaching elementary school and a small inheritance from her late husband. She raised my mother there. In 1985, she put the house in a living trust, named herself trustee, and included one very specific clause: "This property shall serve all family members equally, without preference or exclusion." In 2003, Aunt Claudia moved to the assisted living facility. My parents moved into the house. No lease, no rent, just a verbal agreement that they'd take care of the place. Stephanie moved into the basement in 2015. Also free, 20 years, my parents had lived in that house without paying a single dollar in rent. And somewhere along the way, they started talking about it like it was theirs. Our home, the family house, the place we've poured our hearts into. As if the woman who actually bought it, the woman sitting in an assisted living facility 20 minutes away, had simply disappeared. But there was something my parents had been hiding. The basement. 3 years ago, my mother had it renovated. New lock on the door, fresh paint, tasteful furniture. She told everyone the basement was being used for storage. She told Aunt Claudia it had a mold problem and was unsafe. But I'd seen something on my mother's phone once, an Airbnb notification. I didn't think much of it at the time. That was a mistake. The plan for Thanksgiving was simple. I was scheduled to work a shift at the legal aid office, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., because holiday overtime paid time and a half, and I needed every cent I could get from my attorney retainer. My parents would pick up Maya at noon, bring her to the house for Thanksgiving dinner, and I'd get her the next morning. Of course, my mother said on the phone when I confirmed, "Bring her over. We'll have a wonderful time." My father's voice in the background, "Yep, just bring her." Maya spent the week before Thanksgiving making things. She painted a card for my mother, watercolor turkeys and handwritten words in her careful print, "Dear Grandma, I'm thankful for you. Love, Maya." She wrapped a small gift for my father, a bookmark she'd made in art class with his initials burned into the wood. She made cards for Stephanie and Lily. She put everything in a canvas tote bag, each item tagged with a little heart she'd drawn in red marker. She always drew hearts. She said it made people feel loved. I packed her bag that afternoon like I was sending her into hostile territory. Heavy coat, scarf, gloves, and extra sweater. I slipped a granola bar into her pocket in case dinner ran late. And I put something else in there. An old phone of mine, no data plan, no apps, just the ability to make calls. I programmed 2 numbers into it, mine and Sarah's. Sarah Mitchell was my best friend, a paralegal at the same office. She'd known Maya since she was born. If anything happened, and I was stuck in a meeting with no signal, Maya could reach Sarah. Just in case, I told Maya, "If you can't get me, call Miss Sarah." Maya tucked the phone into her coat pocket and grinned, "Mom, relax. It's just Grandma and Grandpa's house." At 11:45 a.m. on Thanksgiving, I kissed her forehead in the parking lot, watched her climb into my mother's car with her tote bag and her painted cards and her little hearts, and I walked into the office. That was the last time I saw my daughter smile for weeks. Everything I'm about to tell you comes from 3 sources. What Maya told me afterward, the voicemail she left on my phone, and the call log on the old phone I'd given her. I wasn't there. I was drafting a motion for emergency custody when it happened. But I've heard the story enough times now that I can see it. Every detail like I was standing on that porch myself. 1:30 p.m. My mother's car pulled up to the house. The windows glowed warm, garland on the railing, the wreath my mother bought new every year hanging on the front door. Inside louder, the sound of football on TV and the smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing drifting out through the cracks. Maya walked up the steps with her tote bag. My mother let her in. Maya stood in the hallway, hearing voices from the dining room. Stephanie, her husband Brad, Lily, Richard. She started to take off her coat. Then my mother went into the kitchen. Maya heard low voices. Her name, Stephanie's voice, then my mother's, then nothing for a minute. 1:45 p.m., my mother came back out. Her face had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced with that polite, detached expression she wore when she was about to say something cruel and call it practical. Maya, sweetie, we've got a little situation. The table is completely full. Brad's parents came last minute. There's just no room. You should probably head home. Your mom will be back in the morning. Maya looked at the bag in her hands. But I brought presents for everyone. My mother glanced at the tote bag the way you glance at junk mail someone hands you on the street. That's sweet. Just leave them on the porch. We'll look at them later. Behind my mother, my father stood in the hallway. He said nothing. Stephanie looked over her shoulder from the dining room, then turned away. And here's what Maya told me later, in a voice so steady it broke me worse than crying would have. She looked past my mother into the dining room, and she counted. 8 chairs around that table. 2 of them were empty, the door closed. The wreath shook once, then stilled. The football game kept playing inside. My daughter stood on that porch alone, holding a bag of gifts nobody wanted. And she didn't cry. She just turned around and started walking. It was 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I know because I checked the weather log afterward. November 23rd, Portland, Oregon, 2 p.m., 41 degrees, overcast, light drizzle. The kind of cold that seeps through your coat and settles into your bones. Maya walked 3 miles from my parents' house to our converted garage. I mapped it later on my phone, staring at the little blue line on the screen like it could explain something. 3 miles. Past houses with lights in every window, past families sitting together. Down Burnside Street, where the sidewalk disappears, for a stretch near the auto body shop. She carried the tote bag the whole way. Every gift. She didn't leave them on the porch like my mother told her to. She brought them home. The painted cards were damp from the drizzle by the time she got inside. The garage was dark. I'd turned the heat down to save on the electric bill. Maya unlocked the door, turned on one lamp, and sat on the edge of my pull-out couch in her coat. She tried to call me at 2018. No answer. I was in a meeting. She called again at 2022. Voicemail. At 2025, she called Sarah. Sarah picked up on the first ring. She told me later that when she heard Maya's voice, calm, small, precise, she grabbed her keys before the sentence was finished. At 20:31, Maya left me a voicemail. 19 seconds. I've listened to it more times than I'll ever admit. Mom, Grandma said there's no room. I walked home. I'm okay. I'm at the garage. Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. Sarah pulled into our driveway at 20:47. She took a photo when she walked in. I have it. Time is stamped 20:47 p.m. Maya, sitting on the couch, still wearing her coat, the tote bag of gifts on the floor beside her, one lamp on, the rest of the garage dark. Sarah wrapped Maya in a blanket, turned the heat up, and drove her to Sarah's apartment for the evening. By 30:15, Maya was eating leftover mac and cheese at Sarah's kitchen table with Sarah's cat in her lap. She was safe, but I didn't know any of that yet. I was still at the office, reviewing case files, assuming my daughter was sitting at my parents' table, eating pie beside a warm fire in a house full of people who loved her. I checked my phone at 6:12 p.m. during my break. 4 missed calls from Sarah, 1 voicemail from Maya. 0 calls, 0 texts from my mother, 0 from my father, 0 from Stephanie. I listened to the voicemail first, 19 seconds. I stood in the break room with my back against a wall and listened to my 10-year-old daughter wish me happy Thanksgiving from a garage she should never have been in that afternoon. Her voice was steady, a little thin, not crying, worse than crying, because it meant she'd already decided this was something she was supposed to handle on her own. I played it again, then one more time, because some part of me was waiting for it to stop being real. Then I called Sarah. She answered immediately. She's fine, she's asleep, she's at my place. And then, quietly, Rebecca, she walked home alone in the rain on Thanksgiving. Sarah had already sent me the photo by text. I opened it. My daughter, still in her coat, sitting on the couch. One lamp on, that bag of gifts on the floor. Timestamp 24:07 p.m., November 23rd. I looked at that image for a long time. I looked at the way the light hit only half her face, and the way the rest of the garage behind her was just nothing. Dark walls, no decorations, no warmth, no people. I said, "Thank you, Sarah, I'll finish my shift." She paused. "Rebecca, I'll finish my shift," I said again, and I did. I went back to my desk. I filed motions and answered emails and spoke to clients in the calm. Even voice they train you to use when everything is falling apart and you are the one person in the room who cannot afford to show it. I did not call my mother. I did not call my father. I did not call Stephanie. There was nothing left to discuss. From that point on, there was only documentation. When my shift ended at 10 p.m., I sat in my car in the parking garage for maybe 5 minutes, engine running, heat on, phone in my hand. I scrolled through my contacts and stopped at one name, Claudia Bennett. I didn't call yet, not at 10 at night, but I would. And when I did, things would begin moving in a direction my parents had never once imagined. My mother called me at 90. There's 03 the next morning, November 24th. I know the exact time because I was recording. Oregon is a one-party consent state. That means as long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal. I knew. I pressed record before I pressed answer. Rebecca, her voice was light, almost cheerful. I heard Maya went home last night. I'm not sure what happened. I told her wait while I rearranged some things, and she just left. You know how dramatic kids can be. I let the silence sit for 4 full seconds. Then Maya called me at 20:31. She said you told her there was no room. She walked home. Shift. I heard it. A recalibration. The gears turning behind that polished voice. Well, it was chaotic, Rebecca. Brad's parents showed up last minute. I had to make a decision. What was I supposed to do? Kick out elderly guests for a child? You kicked out a 10-year-old? Silence. 5 seconds this time. Then Patricia's second gear. Offense. Don't you start with me, Rebecca. I have been supporting you through your mess, letting you use our address for school enrollment, watching your child, helping you out, and this is the thanks I get. You're just like your father's side. Ungrateful, every one of you. Her voice was climbing now, not loud but sharp, the way a blade doesn't need to be big. And let me tell you something. If you make this into a thing, don't expect us to show up at your custody hearing. Don't expect help. Don't expect anything. 9 minutes and 47 seconds. I recorded all of it, including the last thing she said before she hung up. The thing she probably thought was a threat, but that I filed away as evidence. You do anything stupid, Rebecca, and I will make sure that judge knows exactly what kind of mother you are. I set the phone on the counter. I looked at the recording file, 9047, November 24th, 90:03 a.m., and I saved it to a folder I just created. I named the folder Evidence. Stephanie started texting at 9:34. Not a phone call. That would require hearing my voice. And Stephanie had never been comfortable with anything that couldn't be done from a safe distance. 9:34 a.m. Mom told me you're making a big deal about last night. Seriously. 9:36 a.m. Maya's fine. Kids are resilient. Stop being so dramatic. 9:41 a.m. You need to apologize to Mom. She's really upset. 9:53 a.m. If you push this, I swear I'll tell Derek's lawyer you're an unstable mess. I didn't respond to any of them. I screenshotted every single one. Each one went into the folder. By mid-morning, the machine was running. Patricia had already called her sister, my Aunt Linda, and delivered her version. Rebecca abandoned Maya at our house, then blamed us for it. Aunt Linda called me at 11:02, voice soft with concern that wasn't really for me. Sweetie, your mom is just devastated. Can't you let this go? It's Thanksgiving. Did she tell you Maya walked home alone in the rain? A pause. She said Maya left on her own. Maya is 10, Aunt Linda. Another pause, longer. She didn't have an answer for that, so she said she'd pray for the family and hung up. I was putting my phone down when it buzzed one more time. Stephanie again. But this message was different. The kind of mistake that only happens when someone is texting two conversations at once and sends the wrong one to the wrong person. 9:50 a.m. from Stephanie, meant for Patricia. Don't worry, Mom. She won't do anything. She needs us for the custody thing. She's trapped. I read it twice. Then I screenshotted it, opened the evidence folder, and saved it right below the others. She was right about one thing. I did need them for 24 more days. The custody hearing was December 18th. After that, the leash came off. But Stephanie didn't know about the leash. She only knew about the trap. And people who think you're trapped stop watching what they say. That same afternoon, while my mother was posting Thanksgiving photos on Facebook, the ones from the dinner table Maya wasn't allowed to sit at, captioned "Blessed to have family," a woman 20 minutes away in a Beaverton assisted living facility was on the phone with her attorney. And the clock had started. Thomas Brennan called me at 30:42 that afternoon. His voice was what I expected, measured, unhurried, the kind of tone that doesn't waste words, because each one has already been weighed. "Miss Hartley, your great aunt has briefed me on the situation. I've reviewed the trust documents. I want to walk you through where things stand." He spoke for maybe 6 minutes. This is what he said, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly because I wrote it down on the back of a receipt while standing in my garage kitchen. The house was held in the Claudia Bennett Revocable Living Trust, established 1985. Aunt Claudia was the sole trustee. Patricia and Richard had no lease, no deed, no ownership interest of any kind. They were permissive occupants, people allowed to stay at the owner's pleasure, and that pleasure could be revoked with 30 days written notice. Oregon statute, black and white. "Your aunt has instructed me to do 2 things, Thomas said. First, prepare a 30-day notice to vacate addressed to Patricia and Richard Hartley. Second, draft an amendment to the trust, removing Patricia and Richard as beneficiaries and naming you as sole beneficiary, with Maya as contingent beneficiary." I leaned against the counter. "How soon?" "The notice will go out by certified mail Monday, November 27th. I'll bring the amendment to your aunt's facility Monday morning for signature. I've already arranged a notary and 2 witnesses from the staff." I said yes. Then he added something that made me grip the edge of the counter. "Miss Hartley, there's a secondary matter. If Patricia has been generating rental income from trust property without the trustee's knowledge or consent, that may constitute conversion of trust assets. I'll need you to send me everything you have." I sent the folder that night. Every screenshot, every timestamp, labeled and organized the way I label case files. Because when you've worked in a law office, you learn that documentation isn't just a habit, it's survival. Thomas's reply came at 1:22 p.m. "Received. This is comprehensive. We'll proceed Monday." Somewhere in Portland, my mother was probably watching television in a house she didn't own, sleeping in a room she hadn't paid for, spending money she'd skimmed from a basement she'd lied about, and she had no idea that by Monday afternoon, her name would be crossed off a legal document and replaced with mine. November 27th, I drove to Beaverton with Maya in the back seat. 25 minutes on Highway 26, gray skies, rain streaking the windshield. Maya didn't ask where we were going. I told her we were visiting Aunt Claudia, and her face had lit up the way it used to before Thanksgiving stopped being a word that made her happy. The assisted living facility smelled like it always did, lavender air freshener and cafeteria soup, and something medicinal the staff sprayed in the hallways that never quite covered the rest. Aunt Claudia was in the common room, sitting in her wheelchair with her back straight, wearing a cardigan buttoned to the top. Thomas Brennan stood beside her in a gray suit, a leather folder open on the table. Next to him, a notary, and 2 staff members I recognized, Grace from reception and Marcus, a nurse who'd always been kind to Aunt Claudia. Maya saw her first. "Aunt Claudia!" Aunt Claudia's face changed. The sharpness softened just around the eyes. She held her arms open. "Come here, sweetheart." Maya hugged her, careful. The way kids learn to be careful with people who are small and old and precious. Aunt Claudia held her for a long moment, one hand on the back of Maya's head. Then she leaned back and looked at her. "Did you have a good Thanksgiving, honey?" Maya hesitated, looked at me, looked back at Aunt Claudia. It's okay, Aunt Claudia said. The next one will be different. I promise you that. Then she turned to Thomas and nodded once. Business. Thomas read the amendment summary aloud. Steady, formal, every word precise enough for a courtroom. Patricia Hartley and Richard Hartley removed as beneficiaries. Rebecca Hartley, named sole beneficiary. Maya Hartley, named contingent beneficiary. The house, the trust assets, the whole structure Aunt Claudia had built over 40 years of careful saving, redirected. Aunt Claudia signed with a hand that shook slightly but never hesitated. The notary stamped. Grace and Marcus signed as witnesses. Thomas slid the 30-day notice across the table next. Aunt Claudia signed that too. Then she asked for a piece of paper. Not the legal kind, just a sheet of lined notebook paper from Grace's desk. She wrote in a hand that was looser than it used to be, but still legible, still hers. Patricia, I gave you my home so my family would always have a place. You turned away a child on Thanksgiving. That is not what my home is for. Claudia. She folded it, slid it into the envelope with the notice, and looked at Thomas. Send it. Thomas sealed the envelope, addressed it. Certified mail, return receipt requested. Before we left, Aunt Claudia held my hand, her grip still surprisingly firm, and said something I carry with me. I'm 91, Rebecca. I've buried a husband, a brother, and 3 friends this year alone. But I am not too old to protect what's mine, and Maya is mine. By 5 p.m. that afternoon, a sealed envelope was sitting in a blue USPS collection box outside the Beaverton post office, addressed to Patricia and Richard Hartley, stamped certified, and heading east toward Portland. That night, after Maya was asleep, I sat at my laptop with the garage quiet around me, the rain tapping on the roof, and I built a case. I organized the evidence folder the way I organized client files at work. Chronological, labeled, nothing missing, nothing out of order. Every file had a date, a source. The voicemail, 19 seconds, November 23rd, Tuesday, 31 p.m. The photo Sarah took, Maya on the couch in a dark garage, timestamp 47 p.m. The recording of Patricia's phone call, 9 minutes 47 seconds, November 24th, 1903 a.m. Stephanie's texts, all 4 of them, including the one she sent to the wrong person. Aunt Linda's call, noted with time and summary, the Airbnb listing. I'd found it 2 nights earlier. I opened the app on my phone and typed in my parents' address. It took 3 seconds. Cozy basement suite, Portland, Oregon, 63 reviews, superhost badge, and 95 a night. Host name Patricia H. I scrolled through the listing photos, and there it was. Aunt Claudia's old basement, the one with the wood, paneled walls, and the brick fireplace. New furniture, new linens, a little basket of toiletries on the nightstand. 63 5-star reviews, in a house that didn't belong to her, in a basement she told a 91-year-old woman was too moldy to enter. I screenshotted everything, the listing, the reviews, the pricing, the host profile. Timestamp November 26th, 11:47 p.m. Then I closed the app, set my phone on the counter, and sat in the quiet for a long time. Tomorrow morning, I was going to send this to Thomas. I emailed Thomas the full folder at 70:15 m. His reply came at AZ03. Received. I'll include the Airbnb documentation in the supplementary demand letter. The demand letter. That was the second envelope, the one Thomas said he'd send after the first one landed. The notice would tell my parents to leave. The demand letter would tell them how much they owed. I closed the laptop and sat in the garage kitchen for a while, listening to the rain and the hum of the space heater and the sound of Maya breathing in the loft above me. 2 envelopes. One was already in the mail. The other was being drafted, and my parents didn't know about either. December 18th, 25 days after Thanksgiving, the day the lock came off. Multnomah County Courthouse, 3rd floor, courtroom 4C, fluorescent lights, beige walls, the Oregon state flag hanging beside the judge's bench. I sat at the petitioner's table in a navy blazer I'd bought at Goodwill and pressed the night before, my attorney beside me. Derek sat across the aisle with his lawyer, arms crossed, jaw tight, looking at me like I was a problem he'd already solved in his head. The hearing lasted 52 minutes. My attorney presented the file, stable employment, paralegal position at a legal aid office, current lease on the converted garage, character references from 2 supervisors and Maya's school counselor. A letter, the one Thomas had prepared, confirming that I would be moving into a family, owned property in the near future as beneficiary of the Claudia Bennett Revocable Living Trust. Stable housing, stable income, stable life. Derek's attorney tried to argue instability, the small garage, the part-time work, the divorce itself, but he had nothing concrete. No evidence of harm, no evidence of neglect. And the one card my mother had threatened to play, calling me an unfit mother, never materialized. Patricia didn't show up. She didn't submit a statement. I don't know if she chose not to, or if she was too busy dealing with the certified mail envelope that had arrived at her door that very morning. USPS tracking confirmed, delivered December 18th, 10:47 a.m., signed by P. Hartley. The judge ruled at 11:23 a.m., full physical custody to me. Derek would have scheduled visitation every other weekend and alternating holidays. The judge signed the order. The clerk stamped it, and my attorney handed me a copy. I walked out of that courthouse holding two pieces of paper. One said my daughter was mine. The other, the trust amendment, said my silence was over. That same morning, back in Portland, a mail carrier had walked up my parents' porch steps and left an envelope that required a signature. My mother had signed for it at 10:47 a.m., probably expecting a holiday card or a bill or one of those charity solicitations she always threw away without reading. She wasn't throwing this one away. Patricia called me at 11:14 a.m., 27 minutes after she opened the envelope. I know, because I was sitting in my car in the courthouse parking lot, still holding the custody order, when my phone rang and her name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Her voice was different now. Not the smooth, managing Patricia from 3 weeks ago. This was high unraveled, shaking at the seams like a wall with the studs pulled out. What is this? What did you do? This says we have to leave in 30 days. This is our house, Rebecca. I watched a man cross the parking lot with a briefcase, hunched against the rain. I let Patricia's words settle into the air between us. And then I said evenly, it's Aunt Claudia's house. It's always been Aunt Claudia's house. Your aunt is senile. She doesn't know what she's signing. I will contest this. I will take this to court. She was evaluated by her physician last week. Mom, she's competent. The amendment and the notice are both valid. It's been reviewed. I heard Richard in the background, muffled, agitated. Then his voice closer, like he'd taken the phone. Rebecca, this is ridiculous. We've lived here for 20 years. You can't just. I didn't. Aunt Claudia did. You have 30 days. He went quiet. Patricia grabbed the phone back. Where are we supposed to go? I let the silence hold for 4 seconds. Then, I don't know, Mom, maybe somewhere with enough room. She heard it. I know she heard it. Because the line went dead, she didn't hang up gently. She hung up the way people do when the ground shifts under them and they don't know yet whether it's an earthquake or just the beginning of one. The USPS certified mail receipt was already on file with Thomas's office. Delivered, signed, time-stamped. The 30-day clock had started, and there was no unsigned version of that letter. No take-back. No let's talk about this over coffee. Just a legal document in a sealed envelope with a handwritten note from a 91-year-old woman who remembered exactly how many empty chairs were around that table. I started the car, pulled out of the courthouse lot, and drove to pick up my daughter from school. My mother's first instinct wasn't to apologize. It wasn't to call Aunt Claudia. It wasn't even to call a lawyer. Not yet. Her first instinct was to perform. December 19th, one day after the notice arrived, Patricia posted on Facebook, public, not friends only, public. She wanted reach. Please pray for our family. Our eldest daughter has been manipulating her elderly aunt, a 91-year-old woman in assisted living. To take away our home, we have poured our hearts and our lives into this house for 2 decades. We are devastated. Please keep us in your thoughts and prayers. 81 reactions, 42 comments, hearts, crying faces, praying hands. Oh, Patricia, how awful. Stay strong, honey. Some children don't know what they have until it's gone. One woman from Patricia's church group wrote, this is just heartbreaking. Your family is in our prayers. 4 people called me heartless without knowing my name. Not one of them knew a child had walked home alone in the rain because of the woman they were praying for. Stephanie jumped in, her comment pinned under the post. My sister is trying to steal our inheritance. Don't be fooled. Then Patricia called the pastor. Pastor Henderson, a kind man, genuinely, but a man who only ever heard one side of anything that happened in my mother's orbit. He called me that evening, voice careful, measured. "Rebecca, your mother is really struggling. Maybe we could all sit down." "Pastor Henderson, did my mother tell you she turned my 10-year-old daughter away from Thanksgiving dinner?" Pause. She said it was a misunderstanding. I have the voicemail my daughter left me from an empty garage that night. It's 19 seconds long. Would you like to hear it? He didn't answer that question. He said he'd pray for the situation. I thanked him and hung up. I screenshotted the Facebook post, the comments, Stephanie's reply, the timestamps. All of it went into the evidence folder. I did not post a response. I did not comment. I did not correct a single person publicly. There would be a time for the truth to be heard, but it wouldn't be on Facebook, and it wouldn't be on my mother's terms. Thomas was already drafting the second letter. The first week of January felt like standing in an open field while something circled overhead. 6 relatives called me in 7 days. Every one of them had talked to Patricia first. Every one of them used the same script, like they'd been handed a pamphlet at the door. Just apologize, Rebecca. Think about your parents' age. You're tearing this family apart. Aunt Linda called again. "Sweetie, can't you just come to dinner and sort this out? Your mom is beside herself." I said, "Linda, did she tell you about the Airbnb listing? The one where she rented out Aunt Claudia's basement for 4 years without telling her." Linda went quiet. Then, I don't know anything about that. Then she said she had to go. Nobody asked about Maya, not once. Not a single relative in 7 days of phone calls asked how a 10-year-old was doing after being told she didn't belong at her own family's Thanksgiving table. Tuesday night, Sarah came by after our shifts overlapped. She brought Chinese takeout and a bottle of cheap wine and sat on my pull-out couch like she'd done since we were 25. Maya was already in her loft. "You're not crazy," Sarah said, chewing lo mein. "You're not the villain. That voicemail exists. Those screenshots exist. Reality is not up for a vote." Aunt Claudia called every evening that week. Short calls, 3-4 minutes. Her voice steady, like a handrail on a staircase you're afraid to climb. "Thomas is handling it. You just hold on." One night, she told me something I hadn't heard before. In 1965, my sister told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner. She said I didn't dress well enough to sit at her table. I was 32 with a baby. I remember the walk to the car. I remember the cold. Her voice thinned just slightly. "I swore no woman in my family would feel that again. I'm keeping that promise." That same night, I was tucking Maya in when she said it, quiet, not dramatic, not tearful. Just the words laid on the pillow like a question she'd been carrying too long. "Mom, does Grandma not like me because I'm a problem?" I held her. I held my daughter in that loft bed with the rain tapping on the roof and the city humming outside. And I said, "You are not a problem. You have never, ever been a problem." She nodded into my shoulder. She didn't ask again. But I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, and I made a decision that was already made. This would never happen to her again. Not from them. Not from anyone. Patricia hired a lawyer in the second week of January. Not an estate attorney, not a trust specialist. A general practitioner from a strip mall office on 82nd Avenue, whose website had a stock photo of a gavel and the tagline "Fighting for Your Rights." His name was Kevin Marsh, and his first move was to send Thomas a letter on letterhead so then you could read through it. My clients, Patricia and Richard Hartley, have established continuous residency at the above address for 20 years. They have maintained the property, paid utilities, and made improvements consistent with an implied tenancy. The 30-day notice issued by your client is defective and unenforceable. Thomas called me the next morning. If I hadn't known him, I might have mistaken his tone for boredom. But it wasn't boredom. It was the calm of a man who'd been doing this for 4 decades and had seen this letter 1,000 times before. Implied tenancy requires evidence of rent payment or a written lease. Your parents have neither. They are permissive occupants, the notice stands. Thomas's reply to Marsh was 6 pages. Attached, a certified copy of the trust deed showing Claudia Bennett as sole owner and trustee, a physician's letter from Dr. Lee at the assisted living facility, confirming Aunt Claudia's cognitive competency. The signed notarized trust amendment, and like a grenade tucked politely into the last exhibit, a summary of the Airbnb listing, the superhost badge, the 63 reviews, and an estimated income calculation. The final paragraph of Thomas's letter read, "Should your clients wish to dispute this notice in court, we are prepared to file an unlawful detainer action. We also intend to pursue a separate claim for conversion of trust property income in the estimated amount of $68,400. We welcome the opportunity to present the Airbnb revenue documentation before a judge." Thomas told me what happened next. Marsh called him, not in writing this time, on the phone. The bluster was gone. "Mr. Brennan, I need to be honest with my clients if you can prove that Airbnb income." "Thomas, it's on the internet, Mr. Marsh. It has 63 reviews." The line went quiet for a long time after that. Then Marsh said he'd advise his clients to consider their options. 3 days later, I learned from Stephanie that Patricia's lawyer had strongly recommended she not contest the notice. She fired him anyway. Not because he was wrong, because he'd said a thing she didn't want to hear out loud. Stephanie called me on a Thursday in mid-January. I almost didn't answer, not out of spite, but because her name on my screen had come to feel like a weather alert for a storm I was already standing in. But I picked up, and the voice on the other end was different. The swagger was gone. What was left sounded like someone who just done the math and didn't like the total. "Rebecca, listen, I didn't know about the Airbnb thing. That was all Mom. I just live here. You can't put me out on the street. I have a daughter. Stephanie, you've lived in a house you don't own, rent-free for 8 years. You told me I was trapped. You threatened to call Derek's lawyer, and you sat at that table on Thanksgiving while your 10-year-old niece was told there was no room for her. Don't call me about your daughter." Silence. Then the old Stephanie flickered back. "This is insane. You're using an old woman to get back at us. Aunt Claudia doesn't even know what she's signing." She knew exactly what she was signing. She said 8 chairs and a table that seats 12. She counted, she remembers. She hung up. 15 minutes later, I saw the message on the family group chat. "Stephanie, in all caps, Rebecca's destroying this family. She has turned Aunt Claudia against us. This is elder abuse." Elder abuse. Because a 91-year-old woman had decided to protect a 10-year-old one. I screenshotted it, sent it to Thomas. His reply was 2 sentences. "Noted Mrs. Bennett's physician affidavit, and the notary witnesses will address any competency challenge. Let them file if they'd like." What Stephanie didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Aunt Claudia had already anticipated this. Back on November 27th, when Thomas brought the amendment to the facility, he'd also brought a signed affidavit from Dr. Lee. It stated, in medical language that left no room for reinterpretation, that Claudia Marie Bennett was alert, oriented to person, place, time, and situation, and fully competent to manage her legal and financial affairs. Dated, signed, notarized, filed with the trust documents. My mother called me a manipulator. My sister called it elder abuse. But the paper trail told a different story, and paper doesn't flinch when you raise your voice at it. At the end of January, 4 weeks into the 30-day notice, Patricia drove to Beaverton. I wasn't there. I didn't learn the details until Aunt Claudia told me that evening, and Thomas confirmed the rest through the facility's incident report, which he'd requested a copy of. So I'm telling you what happened the way it was told to me by 2 people who had no reason to embellish. Patricia walked into the assisted living facility lobby at 20:23 p.m. She was wearing what she always wore to make an impression, the cream wool coat, the pearl studs, the look of a woman who volunteered at church and expected every door to open accordingly. She approached the front desk. "I'm here to see Claudia Bennett. I'm her niece-in-law." Grace, the same Grace who had witnessed the trust amendment signing, looked at her screen, then back at Patricia. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Ms. Claudia has updated her visitor authorization list. Your name is not on it." Patricia's smile didn't break. Not right away. "There must be a mistake. I've known her for 35 years. I'm family." "I understand, ma'am, but we follow the residents' expressed wishes. I'm not able to authorize this visit." The smile cracked. Patricia asked for a supervisor. The supervisor said the same thing, politely, firmly. The way healthcare workers learn to do when someone powerful is not used to being told no. Patricia began to cry, or at least to produce the sounds and posture of crying. She stayed in the lobby for 17 minutes. When it became clear that tears were not going to unlock the door, the supervisor said, "Ma'am, if you're unable to leave on your own, we'll need to contact security." Patricia left. From the parking lot, she called Richard. I know this because Aunt Claudia heard from Grace what Patricia said in the lobby on her way out, loud enough that 2 other visitors turned around. That girl has poisoned her against us. Then Patricia tried something else. She called Aunt Claudia directly. Aunt Claudia answered. She told me she let Patricia talk for about 12 seconds. The usual opening. Aunt Claudia, please, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We love you. We would never. Then Aunt Claudia spoke. There was no misunderstanding, Patricia. You turned away a child, my great niece, on Thanksgiving in my house, and then you rented out my basement for money you never told me about. Patricia started to stammer. That's not. I was going to. This conversation is over. Talk to Thomas. And she hung up. The facility visitor log, stamp dated with Grace's initials, recorded Patricia's visit and denial. The staff incident report noted, in clinical language, visitor became verbally agitated in lobby, declined to leave when asked, departed after security was mentioned, no physical incident. One more piece of paper, one more timestamp, one more entry in a file that was getting thicker by the day. The second envelope arrived on February 9th. Certified mail, return receipt requested. Same process, same mail carrier, same porch steps. But this time it wasn't a notice to vacate. It was a demand letter. And the number at the bottom had a comma in it. Thomas had spent 3 weeks building the financial case. He'd submitted a third-party subpoena request to Airbnb through their legal compliance portal, standard procedure for trust attorneys investigating unauthorized use of trust assets. What came back was a full earnings statement for the host account registered to Patricia H., linked to the property address. 4 years of booking records, payout amounts, calendar availability, occupancy rates. Total gross income deposited into Patricia's personal bank account from Airbnb rentals of Aunt Claudia's basement, the $68,400. The demand letter was on Thomas's letterhead, 4 pages, clean, clinical, the kind of document that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't need to. It cited the trust clause granting exclusive authority over trust property to the trustee. It cited Oregon law on conversion of trust property income, and it requested, in language so polite it almost sounded like a suggestion, full restitution of $68,400 within 60 days, or the trust would file a civil lawsuit. Attached, the Airbnb earnings statement, the listing screenshots, the 63 reviews, the archived listing from the Wayback Machine. Because Patricia had quietly deleted the Airbnb page 3 days earlier, thinking that if she erased the listing, she erased the evidence. She was wrong. The internet has a memory that outlasts good intentions and bad ones alike. Patricia didn't call me this time. She didn't call anyone, as far as I know. But Richard did. He called me that evening, and for the first time in my entire life, my father sounded like a man who understood that the floor he was standing on had never belonged to him. Rebecca, his voice was thin. We don't have a 68 Zalos and your mother. She spent it. The car for Stephanie, credit cards, a trip to Hawaii last year. It's gone. That's between you and Aunt Claudia's lawyer, Dad. Silence. Then very quietly, what happens if we can't pay? Then Thomas files. I heard him exhale. Not anger. Something more like the sound a structure makes when the last supporting wall gives way. He said, okay, and hung up. Those $68,400, that's how much it cost my parents to turn away a 10-year old on Thanksgiving. Except they didn't pay it. They spent it on a car, on a trip, on a life that was never theirs to fund. And now the receipt had arrived. What happened next? I pieced together from 3 sources. A voicemail Richard left me at 3 a.m. that he probably didn't remember leaving. A text exchange between Stephanie and her husband Brad that Brad forwarded to me weeks later. And one very awkward phone call from Brad himself. The Hartley family, the one my mother had spent 35 years curating for the outside world, the Facebook posts, the church committees, the matching sweater holiday photos, began to eat itself from the inside. It started with Stephanie. She'd finally done what she should have done years ago. She looked at the numbers. The car her mother had given her, the 22,000. The gift she'd made towards Stephanie's yoga studio deposit, 6,000. She'd always assumed these came from her parents' retirement savings or Richard's pension. They didn't. They came from a basement that wasn't Patricia's, in a house that wasn't Patricia's, rented to strangers on a platform tied to Patricia's bank account. Stephanie called Patricia. I wasn't on the line, but Brad told me later how it went. Mom, you told me Dad's pension paid for all of this. Don't you dare question me, Stephanie, after everything I've done for you. You used stolen money to buy my car. The word stolen landed hard enough that Patricia didn't speak for 6 seconds. Then she did what she always did. She pivoted to Richard. If your father had been any kind of man, I wouldn't have had to. Richard apparently had had enough. You rented the basement, Patricia. You spent the money. Don't put this on me. It was the first time, according to Stephanie, that Richard had ever contradicted Patricia in front of anyone. But it was also 20 years too late. And they both knew it. Brad called me the following day, polite, nervous, his voice pitched a half step too high. Rebecca, I know we haven't been close, but Stephanie and I didn't know about the Airbnb money. Is there any way you could talk to the lawyer? Maybe work something out? Brad, I'm sorry you're in this position, but the trust belongs to Aunt Claudia. You'll need to talk to her attorney. He thanked me and hung up. I think he was hoping for mercy. I think he deserves some, honestly. But mercy wasn't mine to give. It was Aunt Claudia's. And Aunt Claudia had already given it for 20 years. She was done. That week, Patricia made one more Facebook post. Shorter this time. When your own family betrays you. 17 reactions, 4 comments. And then a 5th from someone I didn't recognize, someone who had apparently been a guest in that basement. Patricia, I've been to your place. Is that the same basement listed on Airbnb? I thought your aunt owned that house. 3 hours later, the post was deleted. But I'd already taken the screenshot. The family that had presented a united front at every holiday, every church potluck, every family photo, the one that smiled in matching sweaters while a little girl sat alone at an empty chair was dissolving. Not because I tore it apart. Because the truth did. The 30-day deadline fell on January 17th. I know, because I'd counted every single one of those days, the way a paralegal counts filing deadlines, precisely with a quiet awareness that the wrong number could change everything. Thomas emailed me the evening before. Deadline is tomorrow. If they don't vacate, I'll file the unlawful detainer action with the circuit court Monday morning. I drove by the house that afternoon. I didn't stop. I didn't pull into the driveway. I just slowed down as I passed, the way you slow past an accident on the highway. Not because you want to look, but because something in you needs to know. Both cars were in the driveway, lights on in the kitchen. The Thanksgiving wreath was still on the door, dried out, browning at the edges. Nobody had taken it down. They weren't leaving. That evening, Patricia texted me. Not a phone call this time, just 7 words on a screen. We're not leaving, this is our home. I forwarded it to Thomas. His reply, filing Monday. Stephanie, at least, had read the room. She and Brad had found an apartment in Gresham. Small, 1-bathroom, the deposit paid by Brad's parents. Stephanie had texted me the day before. Her last message in what had become a very short thread. I moved out, I'm done with this. But you should know, Mom is telling people you're going to have her arrested. I didn't respond. That same week, I'd noticed that the Airbnb listing had vanished from the platform. Patricia had deleted it, scrubbed the page, removed the photos, taken down the reviews. She probably thought that if the listing didn't exist, the evidence didn't either. But Thomas's paralegal had already captured the full listing through the Wayback Machine, archived pages, cached reviews, host profile, everything. And the Airbnb earnings statement, obtained through the legal subpoena, existed independently of the website. You can delete a listing. You can't delete a bank deposit. Monday morning, Thomas Brennan walked into the Multnomah County Circuit Court carrying a filing folder 4 inches thick. And inside that folder was 30 days worth of silence, 63 reviews worth of evidence, and one 91-year-old woman's refusal to let her family be redefined by the people who'd stolen from it. The filing went in on a Monday. Thomas submitted the unlawful detainer action with every exhibit attached, the trust deed, the 30-day notice with its certified mail receipt and USPS tracking confirmation, the physician's capacity letter, the trust amendment, and, as a supplementary exhibit, the full Airbnb documentation. The clerk stamped it, assigned a case number, and scheduled the hearing for 12 days out. Oregon moves fast on unlawful detainer. The law doesn't like ambiguity about who owns a house and who doesn't. Wednesday afternoon, a process server walked up the porch steps of Aunt Claudia's house and knocked on the front door. Richard opened it. The server handed him 2 copies of the summons, one for him, one for Patricia, and had him sign the acknowledgement of service. Richard looked at the papers, then at the server, then back at the papers. His face, the server noted in the affidavit of service, filed the next day, went pale. Patricia wasn't home. She was at the grocery store, which meant Richard had to deliver the news himself. I don't know exactly what that conversation looked like, and I don't need to. I know the result. Patricia called Pastor Henderson. She called Aunt Linda. She called 3 cousins. She worked the phones like she always did, pulling the levers of sympathy she'd installed over 35 years of casseroles and prayer chains. But this time, the machine didn't respond the way it used to. Pastor Henderson told her, gently, that he'd spoken with me and heard the voicemail. He suggested reflection. Aunt Linda didn't pick up. One cousin asked Patricia, is it true about the Airbnb thing? And Patricia hung up on her. And then there was Mrs. Chen. Lily Chen, 68, lived 4 doors down from Aunt Claudia's house. She'd been there almost as long as the house itself. She'd watched Patricia and Richard come and go for 20 years, and she had seen something on Thanksgiving that she hadn't understood until now. She called me that Friday evening. Her voice was soft, Oregon polite, cautious in the way people are when they're about to say something that's been sitting in their chest for 7 weeks. Rebecca, honey, I need to tell you something. Thanksgiving afternoon, I was on my porch bringing in the mail, and I saw your little girl walking down the sidewalk alone, carrying a bag in the rain. I almost called the police. I should have. I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe she was going to a friend's house. But it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right, and I didn't do anything. And I am so sorry. I thanked her. I meant it. And I told her that if she was willing, Thomas might ask her to provide a written statement. She said yes before I finished the sentence. The hearing was on a Tuesday. Multnomah County Circuit Court, Portland, small courtroom, fluorescent lights. A judge named Honorable David Park, who looked like he'd heard 15,000 cases and remembered the details of every one. Thomas sat at the petitioner's table. I sat behind him. On the other side, Patricia and Richard alone, no attorney. Marcia declined to continue representing them after reviewing the Airbnb evidence, or more precisely, after learning that Thomas intended to introduce it in open court. Patricia hadn't found a replacement. She sat in her cream wool coat, pearl studs, hands folded in her lap like she was at Sunday service. Richard stared at the table. Thomas presented the case in under 25 minutes. The trust deed, the notice, the certified mail receipt with USPS tracking and Patricia's signature, the physician's capacity letter, the trust amendment, and then, as a supplementary exhibit, the Airbnb documentation, the earnings statement, the listing screenshots, the reviews, the archived Wayback Machine capture. Judge Park reviewed the file. Then he looked at Patricia. "Ma'am, do you wish to respond?" Patricia stood. She smoothed her coat. "Your Honor, we have maintained that house for 20 years. We are family. This is a family disagreement, and I believe it can be resolved privately." Judge Park looked at the file again, then back at Patricia. "Mom, did you receive rental income from the trust property?" Patricia's hands tightened on the edge of the table. That was just a small. "Did you or did you not receive rental income from property held in a trust for which you are not the trustee?" The courtroom was very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system humming. "Yes." Judge Park ruled in 13 minutes. Writ of possession. Patricia and Richard Hartley were ordered to vacate the premises within 10 days. Regarding the Airbnb income, the judge noted that the trust had standing to pursue a civil claim for conversion and recommended the parties either mediate or proceed to trial. Patricia cried, Not the performative kind she deployed in the assisted living lobby. Real tears. The kind that come when you realize the script you've been reading from your entire life doesn't have any more pages. Richard sat beside her, hands on his knees, looking at the floor. Thomas gathered his documents. I stood and walked out through the double doors into the hallway, where the light was gray and flat and unremarkable. No dramatic music, no slow motion moment. Just a woman holding a court order in a manila folder, walking toward the elevator. The judge didn't raise her voice. He didn't have to. The documents spoke for themselves. They always do when you take the time to keep them. They moved out on a Saturday in early February. I know, because Sarah drove past the house that afternoon. I'd asked her to, not because I needed to witness it, but because some part of me needed to know it was real. A rented box truck in the driveway. Richard carrying lamps and boxes. Patricia directing him from the porch in her coat, arms crossed, mouth aligned. Neighbors watched from porches and driveways, the way people do when something private becomes public. Not with glee. Just with that quiet, careful attention that comes from knowing a street's story just changed. Sarah told me one detail that stayed with me. Patricia took everything. The furniture, the kitchenware, Stephanie's old trophies from the upstairs shelf, the Thanksgiving dishes she'd used for the dinner Maya wasn't allowed to attend. She took the curtains. She took the bathroom mirror she'd hung over the sink. But she left the photograph, the framed one. Aunt Claudia standing in front of the house in 1962, the writing on the back that said, "For my family, all of them." It was still on the wall when they locked the door behind them. Sarah sent me a text at 40:47 p.m. They're gone. I went to the house the next morning. Maya was with me. The place was cold. They'd turned the thermostat down before they left, one final small act of pettiness in a long catalog of them. The rooms were empty, dusty in the corners, sunlight falling through bare windows onto hardwood floors Aunt Claudia had picked out almost 60 years ago. I found the photograph in the living room, still hanging, slightly crooked. I took it down, wiped the glass with my sleeve, and hung it back, level center, where it belonged. Patricia and Richard rented a one-bedroom apartment in Beaverton, $600 a month, first rent payment in 20 years. The unlawful detainer judgment was now part of their court record, which meant any future landlord who ran a background check would see it. Thomas had informed them that the 68,400 claim remained active. If they didn't agree to a repayment plan within 60 days, the trust would file in circuit court. She took the Thanksgiving dishes. She left the photograph. I suppose she knew which one she'd earned and which one she hadn't. We moved in at the end of February. Maya carried her backpack up the porch steps, the same steps she'd stood on Thanksgiving afternoon, holding a tote bag full of gifts, and stopped at the front door. She looked at me. I looked at her. "This is ours," she asked. "This is Aunt Claudia's," I said. "She's letting us take care of it." Maya nodded, like that made perfect sense to her. The way things do when you're 10, and trust hasn't been ruined for you yet, at least not permanently. She picked the upstairs bedroom, the one with the window that looked out over the backyard where Aunt Claudia had kept a vegetable garden in the 70s. The room was bare, just walls and light, but Maya walked in and spun around once with her arms out, like she was testing the space. And I stood in the doorway and watched her, and didn't try to name what I was feeling, because I knew if I did, I'd lose it. Thomas finalized the paperwork. The trust remained in Aunt Claudia's name. She was still trustee, but I was now the named beneficiary and custodian of the property. I would pay the property taxes, maintain the house, carry the insurance. It was responsibility, not a gift. I understood the difference, and I was grateful for it. I called Aunt Claudia that evening on FaceTime. The staff helped her prop the phone on her tray table. She watched Maya taping a hand-drawn sign to her bedroom door. Maya's room with a little heart in the corner. "The little heart is home," Aunt Claudia said. That week, I enrolled Maya in an art class at the community center on Saturdays. She'd stopped drawing after Thanksgiving. Not dramatically, not as a statement, just the way light dims when you close a curtain. She stopped carrying her sketchbook. She stopped putting hearts on things. The first Saturday, she came home with a sheet of butcher paper rolled under her arm. She unrolled it on the kitchen table, and I saw what she'd made. A house with a big table in the center and 12 chairs drawn carefully around it. Each chair had a name tag. Aunt Claudia, Mom, Miss Sarah, Mrs. Chen, and in the middle, the chair with the best view of the window, Maya. She didn't draw herself at an empty chair anymore. She drew herself at the big one, and every chair had a heart on it. I also did something for myself that month, something I probably should have done years earlier. I found a therapist. Not because I was broken, but because 37 years of a family like mine leaves patterns you don't even see until someone shows them to you. The first session, I sat in a chair that was nicer than any furniture in my old garage and told a woman with kind eyes and a box of tissues that I'd spent my whole life trying to be small enough to keep the peace. She said, "And how did that work out?" I almost laughed. It didn't. "No," she said, "it never does." In March, a letter arrived. Not certified, not from a lawyer, just a regular envelope with my mother's handwriting on the front, the loops careful and deliberate, the way they always were when she wanted to look composed. I opened it at the kitchen table while Maya was at school. "Rebecca, I'm your mother. This has gone far enough. Can we talk?" 9 words, no apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done to Maya, or what she'd done to Aunt Claudia, or what she'd done with 400 that wasn't hers. Just, "Can we talk?" As if the problem was a conversation that hadn't happened, rather than a lifetime of choices that had. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and put it in the evidence folder. Same folder, same system, same shelf. It lived next to the voicemail transcript and the Airbnb screenshots, and the court filing, and every other document that told the real story of what family had meant in the Hartley house. I didn't respond. I didn't block her number either. If she wanted to reach me, she could go through Thomas. That was the boundary. And the boundary was not a punishment. It was a door that worked the way doors are supposed to. You could knock, but you couldn't just walk in and rearrange the furniture. Aunt Claudia called me the same week. She sounded tired, but clear, the way she always did, like someone who had made peace with most things and was working on the rest. She said, "I'm not angry at Patricia, Rebecca. I'm disappointed, but I won't let disappointment stand above my great niece's safety, not ever." Spring came slowly that year. Maya rode her bike on the sidewalk out front. Mrs. Chen waved from her porch every afternoon and sometimes brought over dumplings. Sarah came by on Fridays with takeout. The space heater in the old garage didn't hum anymore because we didn't live there anymore. And I only thought about that sometimes. Late at night, sitting on Aunt Claudia's porch, the same porch where my daughter had stood in the rain 8 months earlier, holding a bag of gifts for people who told her she wasn't worth a chair. I think about what Maya said that night in the garage when she asked if she was a problem. And I think about the drawing she made in art class. 12 chairs, each one labeled, each one with a heart. Family isn't a table you're seated at. It's how people treat you when they think no one is watching. And someone was always watching. A 10-year-old girl with a bag of gifts and a memory that doesn't forget. She's 11 now. She still draws hearts on everything. And the front door of this house stays open. That's our story. Mine and Maya's. If it meant something to you, if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your child, or if you've ever been the kid standing at that door, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and for staying until the end.